Five Nights at Freddy's has a new book series. They ventured into the literary world going on like 8 years ago, so it's no surprise that there's a new FNAF book. But this new series, unlike all the ones that came before it, doesn't have like a catchy title or anything. We had the Silver Eyes trilogy, then we had Fazbear Frights, then Tales from the Pizzaplex, but for these, all we have is interactive novel, which feels kind of clinical, but it's the only title that carries through for all the stories, so we'll take what we can get. But this series has been some of the most impactful books ever released for this franchise. The first one, VIP, was a shorter example of what the series is, but it gave us a lot of information between Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach, bridging that gap from the books to the games. The next one we got was the week before, one of the best books we've ever gotten for this franchise, and it gave us so much in-depth lore on the context for FNAF 1, answering questions we've had since the beginning of the franchise, including Phone Guy's name. And now, for the third novel we've gotten so far in this incredible series, we have the earth-shattering revelation, it's just into the pit. Again, the slices, put on your aprons. Let's bake ourselves a theory. So what is Return to the Pit? Well, it's proof that Into the Pit is Scott's favorite child. This is now the third time he's chosen to tell this story. First, it was the original Fazbear Fright short story, then we got the Mega Cat Studios produced game, and now we have this interactive novel, all telling the same story. But unfortunately for our brains and sanity, even though it's the same story 3 times, each of them is meaningfully different from each other. Things change each time. So we should go over what actually happens in this book, because when I tell you there are some crazy insane lore revelations, I'm not exaggerating. That being said, it's a little tricky to summarize a choose-your-own-adventure novel. I mean, it's a choose-your-own-adventure novel. There's so many different ways this story can unfold. So I looked at this book and I tried to figure out how best to describe it to you. To me, it made the most sense to split this book into 3 main storylines. Sure, there are countless choices you can make within each storyline, but for the most part, most of those choices either bring you eventually back to the main plot or kill you. So there's 3 like end states that you can get to. So moving forward, I'm going to refer to them as the Canon playthrough, the Secret playthrough, and the Avengers playthrough. And yes, those are the best descriptors I can give each plotline, I'm not kidding. But we'll start with the Canon playthrough. Happy New Year. So, Gamersupps. Look, you know him, you love him. I've been partnered with him for some time now. Gamersupps is the leader in powdered energy, gamer drink stuff. Dog, I don't know what they want me to say. They let me say whatever, so I'm just gonna be honest. It's drinks, it tastes really good. There's caffeine and non-caffeine versions. And if you use code RyeToast, you get 10% off your whole order, and it gives me money. Recently, they just came out with like chug juice. It's really good. It's like it reminds me of like a blue tropical punch kind of vibe. Like it's like berries, it's lemon, it's lime. I've been drinking it nonstop. All 3 stories start the same. You are Oswald, and you and your lower class family are stuck in this dying town. Over this summer, your dad doesn't want you alone at home all day, so he brings you to the library on his way to work. And about halfway through the day, you go from the library to Jeff's Pizza for a slice to eat, and then you repeat. It's not a bad day, but it's the only thing you get to do every single day all summer, so it gets old very quickly. One day, while you're annoyed at your father, you find the abandoned ball pit in the back of Jeff's Pizza, and to get back at him, you decide to hide, so he'll have to come inside and look for you. But when Oswald goes into the ball pit, there's no bottom. He keeps going deeper and deeper. So deep, in fact, that he has to struggle to swim back up. And when he gets there, he's not in Jeff's Pizza anymore. Well, the building layout is mostly the same, but there's arcade games, playing children, the ball pit isn't abandoned anymore, and there's an animatronic band on stage. Looking around, Oswald finds out that this ball pit has sent him back to the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that used to be in this very building. We then meet 2 kids, Chip and Mike, and become quick friends with them, spending the whole day playing arcade games and eating pizza, even though there's a creepy yellow rabbit suit that's staring at us in the back corner. Eventually, Oswald figures he should go home as his dad is probably getting worried, and he goes back into the ball pit, which is now a shallow, normal ball pit. He counts to 100 while laying underneath, and when he sits back up, he's back at Jeff's Pizza, noticing that in the current day, no time has passed at all. So after this resulting turn of events, Oswald spends the rest of his summer visiting that 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza every single day, until the last day of summer, where when you enter the ball pit, he finds a screaming scene. Parents and children are running all over the place, frantically trying to get out as fast as they can, and in that moment, Oswald notices the yellow rabbit is beckoning him to follow. He does, and is led into a back room where he finds 5 dead children with party hats all on. He runs to escape, and the yellow rabbit gives chase, and he gets back out through the ball pit, where his dad finds him and scolds him for hiding from him even though he was calling for Oswald. But in that moment, the yellow rabbit bursts out of the ball pit, grabbing his dad, and there's a fight. After some wrestling, his dad is in the ball pit somewhere unseen, and the yellow rabbit exits, grabbing Oswald, dragging him out of Jeff's Pizza into his father's car, and drives him home. Oswald is freaked out, so he runs up to his room and texts his mom that something's wrong with dad. And she gets back and assures him that his dad is fine, just in bed, and that he should get some rest since the first day of school's tomorrow. Oswald agrees and goes to bed, and in the morning when he comes down for breakfast, he finds that instead of his dad, the yellow rabbit is sitting at the other end of the table, his mom thinking that the yellow rabbit is his dad. It's in this moment that you can make a choice between 2 playthroughs, the Canon ending or the Avengers ending, fight or flight, or more accurately, play along or run away. But like I mentioned, we're going over the Canon playthrough, so you play along, pretending that it's your dad in front of mom and going to school. And while you're at school, you meet a new girl, Gabrielle, who's reading a book of Greek heroes, and that gives Oswald the courage to face the yellow rabbit. So after he goes home, he sneaks out and runs back to Jeff's Pizza. Searching in the ball pit, he finds his father, but in that moment, the yellow rabbit arrives. They struggle, and he manages to shove the yellow rabbit into the netting of the ball pit, and as it struggles in the netting, it ends up hanging itself, dying. And once it's dead, Oswald's dad wakes up, the two of them hug, make up with each other, and leave Jeff's Pizza. That should have all been pretty familiar at this point. Like I said, it's basically just the story of Into the Pit with a few minor changes. The same thing we've seen in Fazbear Frights and in the Mega Cat Studios game. But that was just the first playthrough, because during that playthrough, if you made specific choices, you would have found half of a Freddy Fazbear's token. And at this ending, you can find the other half outside of Jeff's Pizza. If you have both halves, the book instructs you to form it into one Freddy Fazbear's special token and restart your playthrough. This is how you access the secret playthrough. Starting over and making the same choices, upon entering the ball pit for the first time, Oswald encounters an arcade machine called 8-Bit Escape that's only playable with a special token. If you have this token on your second playthrough, you can start the game. When you do, you're whooshed into the game itself, finding yourself in a pixelated Freddy Fazbear's Pizza you yourself also pixels. If you try to leave the pizzeria, everything dissolves and you respawn at the beginning. If you die, you respawn at the beginning. The only way out is to beat the game. The game itself is the yellow rabbit in a pixelated form, kidnapping 5 missing children and putting party hats on them. To win, you have to find those children, take off their party hats, and not lead them out of the pizzeria, but to a party table to serve them cake. Once you do, the yellow rabbit starts convulsing until it eventually explodes. A blue winner appears and you're whooshed back out of the game. But you're not in 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. You're whooshed back into Jeff's Pizza. But not the Jeff's Pizza you know. It's been fully renovated, similar to the secret ending of Into the Pit, where now there's waiters, Jeff's happy, there's arcade machines, and the dining room is full, your family eating at Jeff's Pizza. And among the arcade cabinets is a framed newspaper article that says, "Kids saved from certain death, whole town rejoices," dated 1985. So in this playthrough, you prevented the missing child incident. But that's not the craziest part, because I saved one playthrough for last. The Avengers playthrough. Remember that fight or flight option at breakfast? This is what happens if Oswald chooses to fight. You can scream to your mom that that isn't your dad but a yellow rabbit, throw pancakes at him, and run out the front door. Once you get to the front lawn, you can choose to run all the way to Jeff's Pizza to go find your dad. Let's get this over with right away. But on the way to Jeff's Pizza, a car slams its brakes in front of you and a 40-year-old man shouts to get in. If you do, after talking with him for a bit, you realize that it's a 40-year-old Chip, our friend from the 1985 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He tells us a lot, and I don't know how to summarize this without sounding crazy, so I'm just going to quote the book directly. Oh, and I'll be skipping around, but there's a ... in the quote when I do skip. It's how you quote a book in literary terminology. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about the ball pit. But a lot of weird stuff happened back in 1985, and there was some strange time jumping stuff too. I didn't experience it personally, but it was kind of a crazy summer for us back then. An awful summer. Other people time jumped, you ask? A couple kids in my time went back. Don't know if it was in the ball pit or something else, but yeah, that rabbit's bad news. Trust me, we all know that. I totally believe it's done that, kidnapping your dad. Not the first time it's time jumped either. No one's managed to destroy it. Oz, I've put together a team to take down the rabbit once and for all. We've been waiting for it to appear in town again, and well, it looks like it's now or never. We were meant to meet today. Will you join us and help us end it? So yeah, Chip is back, and he and a group of people who've been tormented by this franchise have gathered in this town to lie in wait for the yellow rabbit to appear again. To, I guess, beat it up. It's FNAF meets the Avengers meets the second part of It. Can't believe I said that sentence and I only know and enjoy one of those things. There's something wrong with me. But if we go with him, we find a barn filled with adults who are readying a plan and weapons. We also meet Gabrielle, who informs us that she's Chip's daughter. They just moved here for this plan, and we would have met her at school if we just went to school. But now that we're here, plans are turning to action, and the leader is going to come out to give a speech before they go. And when the leader shows up, it's the yellow rabbit. But only Oswald can see it. If we insist to everybody that it's the yellow rabbit, they call us crazy, put us in a room until the plan is over, and when the plan is over, the yellow rabbit comes and kills us. But if we confide in Gabrielle that it is the yellow rabbit and wait until later, the plan goes to fruition, and they all drive up to Jeff's Pizza. And honestly, it's a really funny scene. Quote, everyone barrels out of their cars and into Jeff's, weapons raised. We know you're in there, Chip calls out. You walk into the restaurant and see a very surprised Jeff standing behind his counter. He makes eye contact with you for a moment, and you don't know what to say. Jeff, get into the kitchen, orders Chip. Jeff kind of just stands there in his usual kind of way. Now, Chip turns and yells at him. That definitely sparks action in the pizza chef, and Jeff sprints into the kitchen. Crazy stuff. They start looking for the yellow rabbit, and you go looking for your dad. And you do find his boot in the ball pit, but a scream catches your attention and you stand up to look what happened. The yellow rabbit finally started a counterattack and bit Chip's head nearly completely off. A fight ensues as they all now see the yellow rabbit where it's standing, and in that fight, one of the guns fires a stray bullet that hits Oswald in the chest, killing him. Yeah, like I said, the Avengers playthrough. It's crazy. But what does this tell us about the game's timeline? Because there's a lot of other stuff that happens in this book that I haven't even touched on. There is insane, earth-shattering lore if this book takes place within the game's timeline, but does it? So far, every interactive novel has been safe to assume that it takes place within the game's timeline. VIP was very closely related to Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach, both things that many theorists assume are at least in part within the game's timeline. Obviously Security Breach, but I mean Tales from the Pizzaplex. And VIP takes effort to explain the inconsistencies of the Pizzaplex's design within Tales from the Pizzaplex and Security Breach. It serves as an excellent bridge between those continuities, and it doesn't directly contradict any of the lore that we know from the games. The week before, the next book in the series straight up has a cover description that describes it as a prequel to the first FNAF game. But more than that, it gives us insane amount of lore about the context of FNAF 1 that doesn't necessarily go against anything we know from the games directly, but informs us about the outside of the game that we never got to see. So far, every book in this series has been a part of the game's continuity, because it was only giving us additional information that we didn't have before that we didn't know about the games. I was going in to Return to the Pit, assuming this book would keep that tradition. Exterior knowledge that we didn't have before about a story that takes place within the game's continuity. But if Return to the Pit is meaningfully different or contradictory to the story of Into the Pit itself or anything we know from the game's timeline, then it can't be. So, is it? Well, there are a lot of tempting options and contradictions to choose from throughout this story, but most of them are within the non-chosen paths of the book. The problem with finding contradictions for a story in a choose-your-own-adventure novel is it's not showing us exactly what happened in the games. It's showing us what could have possibly happened in the games. So the only direct information we can use as a contradiction has to take place within the same choices that we see in-game. A perfect example is the whole Avengers storyline. Does that happen in Into the Pit? Hell no. It's not even close to happening. The thing about the Avengers playthrough is it only happens if Oswald chooses to throw pancakes at the Yellow Rabbit and leave immediately, which he doesn't do in Into the Pit. Gabrielle is still the new girl who just moved here in Into the Pit, and Chip lets us know that they just moved here to lie in wait for the rabbit. They wouldn't have stormed Jeff's if Chip never saw Oswald. So in Into the Pit, since Oswald doesn't leave his house and just goes to school, Chip never sees Oswald, so they would have never stormed the building. By the time Chip would have ever seen Oswald in Into the Pit, the Yellow Rabbit would have already been dealt with, and he could have told them that. So technically, the whole Avengers team could exist within Into the Pit, we just never get to see it, because by the time of the end of the story, the threat has been dealt with and we don't know what happens after that. If we want to see if Return to the Pit is canon to the Into the Pit game and game's continuity in general, we need to use the canon playthrough and see if there are any glaring, huge contradictions that we can point to. And all I could find after rereading this book and Into the Pit story and replaying the game is the missing children themselves. In the original Into the Pit story, the missing child incident victims are described as half a dozen kids. And for a while, there was kind of a joke that Scott just couldn't count. We had already known that the missing child incident was supposed to be 5 kids, so we saw that and went, oh, he thought he was rounding up. That's kind of silly. But then the graphic novel came out and doubled down, so some theorists started taking it seriously. And then the Into the Pit game came out and showed us an image of what looks like 6 kids, and doubled down with that with the arcade game where we collect 5 party hats, of which you can go off into a secret area and collect a secret 6th hat being dangled by the purple guy, or William Afton. So with all of this information, we started having to grapple with the fact that there's a possibility that there was a secret 6th victim of the missing child incident. Is it Charlie being lumped into the missing child incident? Is it Andrew? Is it someone we've never heard of? But then Return to the Pit comes out, and it says 5. It says 5 a few times. Not only does it say it in the initial moment, but later on in the story, Oswald is having us panic spiral and remembering what's going on, and he says 5 dead kids. So either Oswald is meant to be the 6th victim, Oswald never sees the 6th victim, or there isn't a 6th victim. And if so, this book is different from everything else we've seen from Into the Pit, and therefore breaks the continuity. So what do I think is going on here? My best guess is that this retelling is just that, a retelling. This isn't one-to-one with any iteration we've seen of the story so far. But before we get upset about that, what if it's on purpose? If we've gotten a Fazbear Frights version of Into the Pit and a Mega Cat Studios version of Into the Pit, and both of them are very similar, is it possible that this version of Into the Pit is distinct from both of those iterations because it is in continuity of the games? After all, VIP and The Week Before seemingly are definitively in continuity of the games, and they're perfected versions of their stories that give us so much more information that we've been lacking about those games. So is this the perfected version of Into the Pit that Scott wants to cement into the game's timeline as the exact story that he wanted to tell us? You put the rabbit ears on and feel stupid. Really, really stupid. Something sharp on each side of the plastic band, just by the top of your ears, suddenly pierces into your skull, clamping onto it hard. It's shocking and sudden. You should cry out in pain, but for some reason you actually feel quite relaxed. Really relaxed. It's like the stabbing into your flesh is a welcoming feeling, something you realize that you've always needed and now finally have. You feel good. You feel very bunny. You are one with being a bunny. Yes, this is right. This is good. God, I hope not. But what do you think? This is a wild story with a lot of wild implications. And frankly, we don't have any time to talk about the implications that this book can make on the timeline, because I had to spend a whole video explaining how weird this book is and that it might not even be a part of the timeline. But I'll probably make a couple videos talking about the grander points this book is trying to bring up. But I do want to make one thing very clear. As much as this book gives me a headache lore-wise, that's not to say that the quality of the book is bad. In fact, this is still a very, very good book and an incredibly fun read. I think it's probably my second favorite FNAF book next to The Week Before. If you have not picked up this book yet, which I think it came out like today or this week, it's been on Barnes & Noble shelves for a couple weeks now. I highly recommend buying and reading and playing through this book, even if you watch this video all the way through. I spoiled a couple endings, but the beauty about Choose Your Own Adventure books, there's so much I didn't talk about. It will still be a fresh read through, I promise you. In the meantime, if you like this video, you'll probably like the video where I talk about what the books tell us about the Mimic, which you can find right here. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share with #ToastArt. Huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. Until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.